See, this is the problem with live streaming. Sometimes things happen. I was muted this whole time. I've been talking to you guys. Let me start over again. Good evening. Welcome to Tom Talk Live. And this is what my wife was trying to text me when I was starting this. Anyway, so I switched over. The problem is I switched over to a new computer and I've had to kind of reset up everything and get everything going again. And obviously, one of the things that wasn't set up was not turning the mic on. So hopefully we're good now. It seems like it's working. I'm hoping you guys can hear me loud and clear. And I said a whole lot of things, so I'm gonna have to start all over again. But anyway, wanted to wish you happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. We're going into Mother's Day weekend, of course. And so I wanted to start with that and then also move into my topic for this evening. I'm hoping it's a topic that will be valuable to you. I'm going to be talking about how to deal with conflict. And so I've been trying to touch on different topics, different things that I think would be interesting and valuable, and things that we kind of all deal with. And conflict is definitely something that we all deal with. And so I'm hoping it's something that, yeah, maybe it's something that's valuable to you. I'd like to know where you feel like you deal with the most conflict. So when you're thinking about your own life and thinking about areas in your life where you have conflict, is it mostly in your personal life, or is that something that's more in your professional life, with friends, with families, with your family, with coworkers? You don't have to get anything too specific in the comments, but I'm just interested to know kind of what areas some of you kind of deal with conflict. And maybe it's just everywhere, right? Maybe conflict is just something that you feel like you're dealing with everywhere. And also let me know if you are someone who is conflict avoidant. I feel like this kind of topic typically will get the attention of those who don't like conflict. And definitely describes me, right? I'm someone who, in general, I'm in general conflict avoidant, right? Like I don't really like it too much. I try to avoid it. I try to stay away from it. It makes me feel uncomfortable a lot of times. I'll even tell you a story of when I was real young. I mean, this is like going back to when I was like in second grade, third grade, something like that. And I remember the teacher had one of those, parent teacher conferences. And so my parents came and they met with my teacher and they asked me to step out of the room. So I went out into the hallway while the teacher talked to my parents. And I was like petrified. Like I was so upset about the potential conflict that would come from this conversation. And the thing is, like, I was a good kid. Like there wasn't an issue, right? I didn't have bad grades and I wasn't, didn't have behavior issues. I'm not really sure why the teacher wanted me to leave the room. I thought that's kind of odd thinking about it now. But I remember just standing out in the hallway, just being so upset, thinking about, it was just creating this conflict in me, just thinking about the two of them talking and what if it's something bad? What if it's something that I'm in trouble for? Um, and so that was from a very young age. And ever since, like I've just always kind of been that way. So I've had to learn to handle conflict in healthier ways. And so I'm going to share with you here in just a moment a conflict management model that was developed not by me, by someone else. And I think it's a really good one, though. I like the way that it's set up and kind of the different parts of it. It's kind of a framework of viewing conflict. And so I'm hoping that when you see it, you'll kind of identify maybe what you have a tendency to move towards. And then I'm going to have some kind of important information to share around that. So we got Sharon here. Sharon says, depends on the situation. If confronting will resolve something, more likely to address it. If I don't feel it will make a difference, probably will avoid it. Yeah, I definitely get that. And this is actually going to fit into the model that we're going to be talking about, this conflict model of the different kind of areas where sometimes it's good to handle things certain ways, right? So, yeah, my wife was trying. She was trying to tell me that I was muted. I didn't have the window open, the comment window open. So that's another problem that I'm dealing with. I'm just having all kinds of trouble with this thing today. So I'll get there. Let me lock that so I can move that. All right. Bear with me, y'all. I appreciate it. Okay. So without further ado, let me share with you this conflict. Come back for a minute. Let's come back for a minute. The first thing we need to know is that conflict isn't bad, right? Conflict is not always a bad thing, right? Obviously, it has kind of a negative connotation, right? We think of conflict as always being a bad thing that is meant to. Am I really getting muted again? Okay, so I have to unmute it on all the different things. All right, hold on. Okay, should be unmuted here. We're gonna get there. This is gonna be a little rough, but that's okay. We're gonna make it work. All right. Sorry about that. So yeah, conflict isn't a bad thing. Conflict is something that we all encounter, right? It's inevitable. It really can't be avoided. We're going to deal with it one way or another. And I've noticed that conflict really comes up most with people that we spend the most time with, right? The people that we are closest to, that we spend time with most often, these are the people that we're going to have the most conflict with. And that makes sense, right? You're around them more, so there's more opportunity to have disagreement. There's more opportunity to see things different ways. And a lot of times conflict comes because both people really care about whatever it is, right? Whatever the topic is, whatever the situation is that there's conflict around, it's because both sides care. And so it's really, there's some positive things that we need to understand and appreciate about conflict and why it's really necessary, because we're all different people. We have different ideas, different viewpoints on things, and think things should be done different ways. So that's just naturally going to be things that conflict with others who think differently than us. And so that's okay. So that's really important for us before we jump into this, just to really acknowledge and understand that conflict is okay, right? And so there's sometimes in us kind of a negative emotion that's affiliated with that, right? A negative kind of feeling like I was describing, in my own childhood, right? Just the potential for being conflict just really kind of twisted me up. And so I think for those of us that really avoid it, there might be some kind of deeper work that we need to do to kind of think about, like, why do I have this aversion to conflict? Why is it something that I'm so uncomfortable with? Right. And there might be people that don't have that. Maybe there's people that like enjoy conflict. I don't know. Maybe there's some of you out there that are like always looking for a fight. I don't know. But I think a lot of us don't really like it and aren't comfortable with it. But it is okay. It is something that is natural and unavoidable, unfortunately, right? It's going to happen. So let's learn to handle it better. So enter the Thomas Kilmann conflict management model template. And I'm not muted this time, so that is good. So let's look at this kind of cool paradigm that he's created, this framework. If you'll notice the bars that are going up and down and left and right. So we have this one spectrum on the left-hand side that says assertiveness, and it's going from low assertiveness to high assertiveness. And then the spectrum along the bottom measures cooperativeness, right? And that goes from low to high. So it's measuring two things, right? It's measuring assertiveness, right? How assertive you are in that situation. And it's measuring cooperativeness, right? How cooperative do you want to be? And then based on those two, right, we have, you'll notice, 4 big areas that are on this chart. So we have in the upper left-hand corner, we have competing. Across to the right, collaborating. Down the bottom left, avoiding. And then the bottom right is accommodating. And then you'll notice there's one more right in the middle, which is compromising. So there's 5 altogether. Excuse me. So think for a minute. Let's kind of talk through these. And as I'm going through them, I want you to kind of identify which of these you think you might be, right? Where you kind of land, because we all kind of have a tendency, right? We all have, we lean towards one of these 5, and we kind of, maybe 1 or 2 of them, you might have kind of 2 of them that you typically lean towards depending on the situation, right? So let's look at avoiding first of all, right? Let's start on the bottom left. So it is low assertive and low cooperative, right? So if you're a person who doesn't like being assertive, and if you're a person that doesn't really like cooperating, right, you're going to avoid it, right? This is called a lose-lose. But sometimes this is appropriate, right? Sometimes it's okay to avoid the situation. And Sharon, I'm going to go back to the comment that you put up earlier, that if you don't feel like it makes a difference, that you'll probably avoid it. And I think that's okay, right? I think in situations, it might be the best situation, it might be the best strategy, rather, to avoid whatever that topic is, right? Maybe it's something that you don't necessarily feel that strongly about. Maybe it's something that you don't feel like, like it's going to make a difference. And so you can avoid it. Now, obviously, it's a problem if you're always avoiding every time there's conflict, right? Anytime there's conflict, if you're always avoiding it, then that's going to create some issues for you, right? You're never going to actually be able to share your opinions, your thoughts, your perspective. You're never going to really be standing up for yourself, right? If it comes down to something that like you want, then if you're always avoiding, guess what? The other person's never going to know what the thing is that you want. Let's look at the top one then. So also a low cooperative side, but high assertive. So the high assertive side of avoiding is competing. And this is when you're very vocal about sharing your opinion, right? You are willing to uh, tell the other person, this is what I want, this is how I want it, right? And you are competing for that viewpoint. So you're competing against the other person. So this is where your opinion, your perspective, what you want is butting heads up against the other person and what they want, right? So that's why it's called competing. So you're competing with them for the thing that you want or the viewpoint that you have. And so typically in this category, you have one person that wins, one person that loses, right? So whoever comes out on top in that argument, in that disagreement, in that conflict, they're going to be the winners, and then the other person doesn't get what they want, right? So it's a win-lose situation. The little tagline is, I'm right, you're wrong. And maybe you know someone like that's their default conflict management style, right? They always are vocal about what they want, and they feel like I'm right and you're wrong. So let me know in the comments if you know someone like that. And if you're brave enough, if that's you, let me know that too, right? Because it's good to be able to self identify. It's important for us to really have self awareness and understand where we land on this. Because I'm going to tell you in a minute the secret that unlocks this whole thing, right? There's a secret key that unlocks this whole framework and makes it work for you. I'm going to tell you what that is in just a minute. But you need to identify what your tendency is first. So, where do you tend to go on this chart? So, that's competing, right? High assertive, low cooperative. Now, let's move over to the top right. So, still high assertive, but now we're moving over next to that high cooperative, which is collaborating, right? So, this is a situation where you're bringing what you want to the table, and the other person is bringing what they want to the table, and you're working together to come up with a solution that allow you to both win. And collaborating is really important, especially in the workplace, right? Where you have to work with other people to create something, working on a project together, or whatever it may be. And so you need to be able to collaborate with them where you're bringing what you want, they're bringing what they want, and you're able to find a way to make it work together. Now, this one, obviously, this sounds like the best situation, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to have a win-win situation where you get what you want, and I get what I want, and we both win? But unfortunately, we know that a lot of times just isn't possible, right? Depending on the situation, it might not be possible for us to both get what we want. But sometimes it is, right? So in those situations, when we can collaborate, we can both put in our input and come to a solution that we're both happy with, then that's great. That's a win-win. Um, and some of the downside that comes with collaborating is it takes a lot of effort, right? It takes a lot of effort, and then you have to have a pretty good relationship with that person to be able to do that. And so it can be challenging sometimes, right, to be able to collaborate. So maybe you can collaborate good with some people, and then you struggle to collaborate with others. So that really is dependent on both parties being willing to come to the table with collaborating. And then let's go down from there. So if we go from high assertive, high cooperative, underneath that we have accommodating, right? So this one is still highly cooperative, but low assertive. And you've probably seen this one before, right? Accommodating is where you're willing to give in to what the other person wants, right? So you're right, I'm wrong. So this is kind of the polar opposite of the competing strategy, the competing tendency, where you're the one that's right and they're wrong. Accommodating is like, all right, you win, I'll give in to what you want. Um, and maybe you know some people like that. Maybe this is your tendency too, where you tend to give in to what the other person wants, right? So that's accommodating, where you're letting them win, you're letting them have what they want. And there's one left in the middle there, you notice, compromising. Now, compromising and collaborating seem kind of similar. And when I first looked at this, I'm like, those are basically the same thing. How do they have that as a separate strategy? The main difference between compromising and collaborating is usually in compromising, you're giving something up in order to make it work, right? Whereas collaborating, you're both winning, you're both kind of getting what you want. With compromising, you're kind of getting part of what you want, but not all of it, right? You're willing to give something up in order to have the thing that you really want. And this is generally like a good solution to a lot of situations, right? And we know that, right? Compromising is something that we kind of hold up as like, this is the ideal. This is what you want to reach, is a compromise, right? Where everybody gets some of what they want, but not necessarily everything we want. So that's compromising. So maybe you gravitate towards that one. So please put in the comments which one you think you are out of the 5, right? Are you avoiding? Are you competing, collaborating, accommodating, or compromising? Which one of those resonates with you where you feel like that's what you tend to go towards? For me, I am kind of either collaborating or avoiding. That's where I typically see myself. And it kind of depends on the situation, kind of like what Sharon said, right? If it's a situation where I feel like I can work with that person and there's some trust there, and we kind of have similar ideas and think about things the same way, right? That's a good kind of some good ingredients for collaboration to happen. But then, yeah, my tendency when there's conflict is, I've had to train myself against this, but yeah, my tendency is to avoid it, right? To just not say anything, not make a big deal out of it, to avoid having that conflict at all, right? And I know this about myself too, because even when there's conflict with other people, and maybe you're this way too, like the conflict's not even with you, right? The conflict's with 2 other people. Maybe it's a friend group and 2 of your friends are getting into an argument. And it makes you're not even in the argument, but it makes you feel uncomfortable, right? It makes you want to avoid it. Like it makes you want to get up from the table and walk away because you don't like even being in close proximity to it. Or even if you're watching like a TV show that has like that kind of a awkward interaction where there's some conflict there, right? Then it just makes you have that uneasy feeling inside, right? That's a good sign that you're probably avoiding too. And Kim says the best conflict management seems to be possible if the person has their emotions regulated. Oh, I like that. Yeah, and this is great, right? So if a person has good emotional regulation, that makes it much easier to manage conflict, right? Because our emotions do play a part in this, right? We get all emotional, we get kind of tense, right? And that can kind of really make a conflict even worse, right? That's what turns conflicts into fights. Conflict is just when there's disagreement. So a conflict doesn't have to mean a fight, right? A conflict doesn't mean you're going to have an argument. It can lead to that, but it doesn't have to mean that, right? So you can have conflict without it having to be that. So a minute ago, I told you that I was going to tell you what the key to all of this is. And the key to it all is that there is a time and a place for all of these, right? None of these are good or bad. So if you were thinking, oh yeah, I'm avoiding, I gotta stop avoiding, can't avoid anymore, that's a bad one. Collaborating's the good one, or compromising's the good one. That's not true, right? There's a time and a place for all 5 of these. So it's about finding the one that's most appropriate to the situation. It's good to know which one you lean towards. So that way, when you're going into a conflict, you know, hey, I have a tendency to avoid. So I need to counteract that and kind of figure out what would be the best solution, right? So you don't want to always go with your default. You want to kind of look at the situation, evaluate the conflict, and think which one of these would be the best for that situation. So, like if we look at competing again, right? We might think, oh, competing is for, those people that are like the jerks that always have to have it their way and always have to win the argument and they're right and you're wrong, right? And there might be some people like that, right? That is what they do all the time. But there is a time and a place for it, isn't there? Right? There's a time when you need to be assertive. There's a time when it is my way, right? I am right in this situation. And what comes to my mind, especially with competing, is when it is like an emergency, right? So, if the house is on fire, I need to come and tell you it's time to get out, right? We don't have time to argue about it. We don't have time for differences of opinion, right? This is where I need to just give you the information. This is what we need to do. I am right. And if you disagree, you're wrong because this is the truth of it. And we need to get this done now, right? So there are times when competing is appropriate. Or maybe it's a work situation where you have a boss and the boss comes and tells you, like, this is how it is. This is what we're going to do. And it's not a time for debate. It's not a time for discussion. It's a time just to find what the objective is and do it, right? Accomplish it. And so competing has its place. Now, you don't want to always be in that area, right? So if that's your tendency, if you know that's kind of where you typically go in a conflict, then you need to think about that because it's not always going to be appropriate to be in that area. Now, sometimes it is, but it's also going to be appropriate to be in these other areas during certain times. So let's talk about collaborating. Obviously, collaborating is a good time, right? When it's appropriate. And when is it appropriate for collaborating? When, again, both parties trust each other, both parties are open to listening to the ideas of others. It's a good time to be able to share and come up with something that both people like, that both people agree with. And so those situations, collaborating is awesome, right? It's wonderful when that works out. It's not always appropriate, right? There are times when you need to discern, like, what's the right way forward. We might have several different ideas from several different people, right? And we need to come up with the way forward. I'm kind of using more work related examples, but I think this applies to both, right? I think conflict styles apply to both professional situations and also to personal situations, right? So, what would be a personal situation where collaborating would be good? Well, let me use a real simple example. And this is probably, I'm hoping, something that you can relate to. I imagine it is. So, when it's Friday night, right? You're off work, headed into town, going to go out to eat somewhere. The question is, where are you going to eat, right? And so I think this conversation, we can see all 5 of these different styles fit into that conversation. And so the competing one, right? Competing is, well, I want to go to the Mexican restaurant. And your partner's like, no, I want to go to the Italian restaurant. So both of you are saying, no, I want to do this. I'm right and you're wrong, right? So that's one way that conversation can play out if both parties are competing. Collaborating in that same conversation would be like, hey, I want this and you want that. Let's kind of come together and say, oh, well, maybe, like if I want sushi and you want Mexican food, well, they have that new tacos versus sushi place, that new restaurant that has both. We could go there, right? So we both win. So that would be an example of collaborating, working in that situation. What would avoiding look like in that conversation? So avoiding is where you don't want anything to do with that conflict. And so avoiding would be just not saying anything, right? Oh, I don't know, whatever you want, right? Kind of not contributing, not cooperating, not asserting anything, right? That would be the avoiding. And sometimes we do that in that situation, don't we? And let's look at the third one there, accommodating. So accommodating is where whatever you want, I'm fine with, I kind of wanted to go here, but it's okay. I didn't have my heart set on that. So it's okay if we go to the Italian restaurant like you wanted to. I kind of wanted this, but that's okay. I don't mind letting you have it this time. So sometimes that's an appropriate response, right? Sometimes it's okay to be accommodating. So we shouldn't identify any of these as being negative in and of themselves. We just have to know when is the right time for each of them. And then compromising would be, right? We both kind of give up on something, but we both win, right? So we're both willing to give up a little bit in order to get what we really want. And so compromising might be, like with this conversation about where are we going to eat. Maybe I'm not going to the place that I really would like to go to, and you're not going to the place you would really like to go to, but maybe we both have a second choice that we can agree upon and go to. So neither of us got the restaurant that we really wanted, but we were willing to put that aside in order to come to an agreement on like a secondary choice, right? So each of these, right, has an appropriate place. And so when you're thinking about your own conflict style, which one of these you gravitate towards, think about the next time you're in a conflict, taking a moment to evaluate it and ask yourself, well, what's the most appropriate way to handle this situation? I want to make sure that I'm not always just going to the same toolbox, right? Getting the same tool every time, right? So if I use that analogy of a tool, right? Maybe this job requires a hammer, right? And so I'm going to get the hammer. But if I use a hammer for every job, right, then that's not going to be good, right? Sometimes I need a screwdriver. Sometimes I need a saw. So a hammer is not always going to be the most appropriate tool for every job, for every situation. And it's just like this, right? Not every one of these is appropriate for every situation. So finding the one that fits the best with what you're trying to do. So I'm hoping you guys found that helpful. Let me know. I'm happy to post this so you can take a look at it later. And I have a few more tips that I want to share, but I thought this would be a good framework to kind of start thinking about the way that we deal with conflict. So let me share a few more different kind of ideas and tools to use when dealing with conflict. So I found that it's definitely helpful when you're in the emotions of it, right? When you're really in the heat of a conflict, because typically, right, that's where we really feel the most uncomfortable, right? So it's not just a difference of opinion where like, oh, you like this, I like that. There's a little bit of conflict there. That's okay, right? A lot of times those things, we can let that go. We don't have to engage. But then there's things that we really do need to stand up for ourselves about where, I need to stand my ground on this. So how do we deal with conflict that then gets escalated to the point of an argument or a fight? How do you resolve those kinds of things? So I think there's a lot of really good communication skills that come into play when we're dealing with that, because a lot of it is communicating, right? It's being able to voice your concerns, but also being open to hearing the concerns of the other person. So I find it very helpful, and you might have heard this one before, to use I and me statements instead of you statements, right? So instead of accusing the other person, well, you did this and you did that, because that is coming off like an attack. So when you're attacking the other person, they're going to defend themselves, right? They're going to get defensive. So good communication can't happen that way. So if instead, right, you are saying, well, I felt this way, or it hurt me when this happened, or when you said that, I felt this way, right? So it's more focused on how you felt, right? And what happened on your side. And they can't argue with that, right? They can't argue with how you feel, right? That's truth, right? That's how you feel. Now they can say, well, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean it that way. I didn't mean to hurt you. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But typically, when you keep it to I and me statements, it allows there to be a little more communication, right? It doesn't shut it down because you're accusing the other person. And then I think it's also good, this is kind of in the same respect of naming whatever the need is behind the emotion that you're feeling, right? So don't just think about the emotion. Don't just think about, oh, I'm angry or I'm hurt, I'm sad. What is the need that you have that's behind that emotion, right? Maybe you need more clarity because you're confused, or you need more support, or you need more respect, right? These are the things that you need that are kind of presenting with these different negative emotions, but that's what the need is. And so when that need is met, right, that's when you will start to be alleviated from those emotions. So it's good to be able to identify what the need is behind the emotion. And then sometimes it's good to just take a break, right? When you're really getting heated up it's not generally a good time to try to come together and hash it out and figure out resolution for a conflict, right? Because you're still upset. And I'll tell you this just to give you a little bit of um, insight. Sometimes, my wife and I, we get into arguments. Sometimes they get into heated arguments, right? I know you're shocked by that, but it even happens to us. And I've noticed with myself that sometimes I can, take a step back and kind of give it a little bit of time, but the upset feelings are still kind of like bottled up down there. And so then we'll start talking about it again, and it kind of brings those feelings back out again, and I get upset about it again. Even though I wasn't feeling upset for a little while, it can kind of bring it back up again. And what was happening is there is I wasn't really dealing with those emotions. I just kind of pushed them down and bottled them up. And then when the triggering things are talked about, right, when that comes back up again, guess what else comes up? All those emotions that I was feeling. And so until you're able to not just take a step back, but take a step back and actually like process how you're feeling, don't just push it down, like actually kind of reflect on it. Again, reflect on what the need is behind the emotion and not just how you're feeling. And then when you come back with that person, right, to resolve it, then you're able to kind of talk about it a little more level-headed and calmly, and being able to um, express what it is that you really need. A cute little volcano. I don't know if that's good or bad, but yeah, I mean, we all get upset, right? I mean, that's something that happens. We all get upset and show it in different ways, and I'm certainly not immune to that. But it's something we learn to handle better, right? Um, and that takes time and that takes work, but it's really worth it. It really is, because conflict is going to happen, right? It doesn't matter how long you've known the person. It doesn't matter how close you are to that person. Conflict is going to come up. And so really we need to learn better ways to handle it. So let me share a few more strategies before I wrap up for the evening. I'm sorry I've had so many kind of technical difficulties along the lines, but we're gonna get it all worked out. The next one's gonna be super smooth. So, but yeah, I got 5 more strategies that I'm gonna go through real quick that I really liked. I kind of came across these, and there's a lot more than this, but I kind of whittled them down to the ones that I liked. The first one is assume positive intent, right? Assume positive intent. Now, maybe this isn't something that you can do all the time, but especially if it's with a partner, especially if it's with someone you care about, someone that you have a more trusting relationship with, don't always assume the worst, right? It's good to assume a positive intent instead of just immediately thinking, well, they meant it in this negative, bad, condescending way. Um, well, why do you immediately go to that, right? We don't know how they meant it. They might have meant it a different way, right? We're not giving them the opportunity to even explain it. We're just getting upset. We're getting angry right off the bat. And so often we make assumptions about the intent of the other person and get so bent out of shape about it, instead of just assuming that they meant something positive, right? And so if they say something and it just kind of hits you funny, and you're just like, I don't like the way they said that, instead of immediately getting upset, be like, well, they probably didn't mean it like that. I know that's kind of how it's making me feel, but they probably didn't mean it like that. Let me ask. Let me talk to them about it and bring it up. And then communication can happen. And then yeah, you're giving the person. I can't tell you the number of times that's happened where, like, yeah, Kim said something that just hit me kind of funny, and then I would bring it up to her, and she'd be like, yeah, I didn't mean it like that at all. And so kind of avoided, getting all upset about something that wasn't even the reality of the situation. It wasn't even something that happened, but it was something that I just perceived, assumed was there that wasn't. And so I think we can save ourselves some heartache there when we just assume a positive intent. Now, you can't do that with everybody, right? I know there's going to be some times where you just have to be cautious. You have to be more discerning. And you can't just always assume that the other person has your best interest in mind. I understand that. So you're going to have to kind of make that call for yourself based on that relationship. This next one I think is a good one too. It's provide a disclaimer for a difficult conversation. So if you know you're about to have a tough conversation, that you're going to bring something up that might upset the other person, right? Might make them feel some kind of way. Maybe it's something that's a little touchy. You already know it's touchy, or you know it's something that has caused a fight in the past, but it's still something I feel like I need to bring this up. Sometimes it's good just to have a disclaimer at the beginning, just to say, "Hey, look, I'm not really sure how to bring this up to you, or I'm concerned about how you're going to take this, but I just, it's something I want to share with you. I don't mean it in this way, but I want to tell you, just kind of giving some disclaimers to a conversation that might create conflict, right? Exactly, yeah. Create a safe space, um, time for conflict. Yep, I like that. And I think another thing that's good with this is it can even be good to share some vulnerability during that time of a disclaimer, right? So if you're giving a disclaimer, just be like, "Hey, I'm not really sure how to express this, and so please be patient with me as I try to tell you this." And so that's kind of giving that other person the opportunity to process that a little bit before you just jump right in there, right? So before they're just smacked in the face with whatever it is that you had to say, right? They're given kind of a little bit of caution to be like, okay, they're about to share something. Let me get into a headspace where I can be open to it. And you might even want to throw in there, hey, if you're open to this conversation now, right? Maybe you want to give them the option of not having that conversation. Maybe it's not a good time for them for whatever reason, right? They're not in a good headspace to deal with another thing, right? Maybe they're already frustrated with something else. And so by having that disclaimer, that you're giving them the opportunity to be like, hey, I'm kind of not in a great mood, or I'm not in a great headspace right now. Is it okay if we talk about this later? Right. So you're really already creating a better environment for that future conversation because you were willing to just have that disclaimer at the beginning. Right. And I know maybe that feels like it can be exhaustive if you're having to do that all the time. And I don't think that's appropriate for every single thing. Anything you think is going to be just the potential for even a little conflict, you don't always have to do that. But if you know it's a touchy subject and you know those things, right? Especially when it comes to a partner or a family member, someone we're close to, we know what those hot button issues are, right? So when it comes to something like that, yeah, give a disclaimer. Let them know, hey, I got something I want to talk to you about, but I'm a little concerned. I want the conversation to go well. And so you're also showing that your intent is positive, right? You're not trying to upset them. You're not trying to create conflict, but you know this is something that has the potential to create conflict, and so you're recognizing that. Yeah, exactly. If you're open to this conversation now, yeah. So and then that gives them right some control and some say in how the conversation plays out, right? Because maybe they're not ready for it. So you're not forcing it upon them. You're allowing them kind of some control in the situation as well. So they feel like an active participant instead of someone you're subjecting your thoughts and opinions and whatever it is to them. Like they're just receiving it. They're actually getting to be active. Let's see. Number 3 is clarify intent versus impact. I like this one too. So this is kind of the age old way that the conversation goes, where one person is hurt, they're upset, and the other person says, well, I didn't mean it that way. I didn't mean for you to get upset. I wasn't trying to make you angry. And I've said that a bunch of times. Let me tell you, that's definitely something I have said. But we have to recognize that that's not the only important part, right? It's not just about what our intent was. Like if we're the one that created the conflict, if we're the one that hurt the other person's feelings or whatever the case may be, it's not just our intention that's important. It's also the impact of what we did. So whether we intended to or not, right, it did have an impact on that other person. And that's valid, right? That should be recognized. I think intention it's not nothing, right? It's certainly difference between I intended to hurt you versus I didn't intend to hurt you, right? That is very different. And so that does count for something, but it's not the only thing that counts. So we have to understand that impact means something. And so we can even recognize if we're the ones that got hurt. And we can say, look, I know it wasn't your intention to do this. I know you weren't trying to hurt me, but what you said, this is the impact it had on me. This is how it made me feel. And so just kind of having acknowledgement of that can go a long ways in resolving that conflict, because then both parties can understand and seek kind of resolution to that. Number 4 is don't always try to win, right? Try to understand. It's not about winning, right? When it comes to conflict, especially in our personal lives and relationships that we value, that we want to grow and thrive and maintain and keep healthy, it's not about winning, right? It's about understanding. And so conflict is good in the sense that it gives us more opportunities to understand the other person. It gives us opportunities to see things from a different perspective. It gives us the opportunity to maybe think about things that we wouldn't have otherwise thought of. So conflict really is a positive thing in so many different ways. If we all just thought exactly the same, we never disagreed on anything, right? How boring that would be. It's because we're all unique. It's because we all have individual ideas and insights and ways that we process information and the way that our brains work, right? It's because of those differences that there's so much creativity in the world, but along with that comes conflict. And so conflict allows us to see that in someone else. It allows us to see a different way of thinking. And so we see that as an opportunity to learn and to better understand. Sharon says, it's hard when the other person gets defensive. Yes. Yeah. It really shuts down communication, right? So, and I'm definitely someone who gets defensive sometimes. So if I feel hurt, I've really had to learn, and I'm still working on this, how to not get defensive, right? Being open to just like willing to hear and accept the information, right? And not seeing it as an attack, but really just, okay, this is what happened. This is how they feel. This is the impact, right? And then once I can hear that and understand it, then I can kind of share my side of it, acknowledging maybe the hurt that I created or whatever the conflict was, right? But yeah, defensiveness shuts that down, right? So that's definitely something that um, has to be worked on, right? So that we don't just immediately jump to being defensive. Yeah, perception, right? So how our actions are perceived. Yeah, absolutely, Sharon. Absolutely. And then there's one last one that I think is good too, and that is celebrating conflict. Celebrating when conflict is handled well. So when you have a situation where you've had conflict with somebody, a friend, family member, a loved one, or a coworker, right? Someone you work with, and you're able to successfully deal with conflict, right? Maybe there was something that did kind of get out of hand, something that there was some upsetness, or maybe it wasn't. It didn't even get to that point, right? But there was conflict, there was disagreement, and maybe a little bit of tension there. And you were able to work through that, and you were able to communicate, and you were able to share, and you were able to find a way to resolve it. That's worthy of being celebrated, right? That you should take time to say, look, I know we came at this from different angles. I know that you thought this, I thought this, but look, we were able to talk about it. We were able to work through it, and we came up with this really great solution. And I'm proud of that. It's good to acknowledge that. It's good to say that because then it builds more rapport, it builds more trust, it builds that relationship, and it shows that, hey, we're able to do this. So guess what? Next time there's conflict between us, we have a foundation that we've already started to build on. We've already seen that we can deal with conflict. So that's going to give us some confidence moving forward into this next conflict that we're dealing with, showing that, hey, we know how to handle this. Whatever may come, we're going to figure it out. We're going to find a way to make it work. And so I think, yeah, taking time to celebrate those wins is so important. And sometimes they're not always like, sometimes they're battles, right? Maybe they got a little out of hand. Maybe some feelings were hurt. They, got upset. Even still, once you resolve it, celebrate that. Celebrate, look, I know we really went at each other with this, but we were able to resolve it. We were able to figure it out. And so, yeah, taking time to really celebrate those wins is so important. So that's really what I wanted to share with you this evening. I hope some of that's been helpful. Maybe there's a few nuggets in there that you want to pull out. I know there's a lot of things there. Maybe not all of it resonates with you, but I do encourage you to think more about how you deal with conflict and think about where you would like to go with that, right? How would you like to develop your own conflict resolution skills? Because again, it's inevitable, it's going to happen. And so, if this is something like an area of your life that you would like to work on more, that you would like to learn more about, feel free to reach out to me. I have some more materials that I can share with you on this. And maybe this is even something that you would want to have a conversation about. Maybe it's something you want to look deeper into, and I'm certainly open to that. So feel free to message me and we can set up a time and have a deeper discussion about this. But thank you all so much for being patient with me through all my problems here. I'm hoping that next time around it'll go a little more smoothly, and hopefully I'll work out all the kinks. But hope you guys have a great evening and a great weekend, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.